Welcome to Mode Bespoke, I'm Atenas. For today's tutorial, we're going to be making this baby sweater using the alternating post stitch. Let's get started. Here's a look at the baby sweater that we're going to be crocheting today. Now, this pattern is measurement based, so you will need to get the measurement for the size baby sweater you want to make. The available sizes are going to be from newborn to 12-month-old. Now, if you want to get the measurement sizes for the pattern, you can go to my website. I'm going to put a link in the description box below. There's going to be a sizing chart on there. It's free. Just grab the size that you need for this pattern and then come back and work on the pattern with me. The yarn I'm using for this project is called Wool-like, and this is available in Michael's stores at the US, and it's a size 1 fingering yarn. I'm going to be using 2 threads simultaneously, so you're going to need 2 skeins, and you're going to use 1 thread from each one, and you're going to crochet with them simultaneously. So you're just going to pull them together like this, and you're going to crochet them as if they were just 1 thread. Now, you don't have to do this if you don't want to. I just happen to really like the feel of this yarn. You can also use a sport yarn or a DK yarn. And because this is a really common question in other projects that I've used this yarn with, you do not have to use 2 threads. If you use a sport, DK, a worsted yarn, any of those, you can just use 1 thread. I use 2 because the fingering yarn is quite thin, so I want it to be just a little bit thicker, so that's why I use 2 threads. But no, you don't have to. You can just use a larger yarn. Alright, so moving on to the hook. I'm going to be using a 4.25 millimeter, so here it is. So it's a G 4.25 millimeter hook. You're also going to need a pair of scissors, a yarn needle, and a button. Now this button, let me grab my measuring tape real quick. So it's the same one I used here for this little sample one, and it is about 1 inch in diameter. Really, you can use any size button you want. You can also just completely omit the button if you don't want to add one. So let's talk about construction real quick, because we're going to need to make a few pieces before we sew them all together. So for the body of the sweater, you're going to need 2 pieces that look like this. So your initial chain is going to be the width of the project, and then we're just going to add rows to add length, and then you'll add the shoulder strap. So you're going to have one that's just the shoulder strap, and then the second one is going to have the buttonhole. So you're going to need 2 of these pieces, and then you're also going to need 2 sleeves. So here's one sleeve already made, but the way you're going to build it is like a trapezoid, so like this. And you're going to need 2 of these, and then we can sew everything together and just add the neckline and then just add the little elastic here at the bottom, or I guess the trim at the bottom of the sweater. To make things easier, I'm going to just work on one color. We'll talk about the colored stripes a little bit further along in the tutorial so that you can make this pattern if you want to, but I'm just going to teach you how to do the one color for now. So our initial chain is going to be the width of the sweater. Now remember to use the measurements. So go to the website and check out those measurements and use that instead. Now for your initial chain, since you are going to be making 2 of these same pieces, write down how many chains you made so that the width of both of your pieces is the same. So again, use the measurement and jot down how many stitches you crocheted so that you have 2 identical pieces. So we're going to begin with a slip knot. So just grab your yarn, you're going to wrap it around 2 fingers, and you're going to insert your hook behind that top loop, grab the yarn from the back, and pull it through the loop. And then you just remove your fingers, and to tighten the knot, you pull on the 2 yarn threads below. If you want to tighten it a little bit further, you just pull on each thread individually. So let's start working on the chain. You're going to yarn over, so you're going to wrap the yarn around your hook, and you're going to pull the top thread, so this top loop, through the bottom one. And that's 1. So we're going to chain another one, and you're going to yarn over and pull the top loop through this bottom loop. That's 2. Yarn over, pull through for 3, and yarn over, pull through for 4. So just continue to make a chain in whatever length it is that you need for the size sweater that you need. I'm just going to chain a few more to make a small sample here, but once you've completed your chain, so remember to jot down how many chains you made, we're going to chain an additional 2 stitches. So this is going to be for row 1. So we begin with a chain 2. So there's 1 and then 2. Now we're going to work with a double crochet, and we're going to skip these first 2 chains. We're going to stitch into the 3rd chain from your hook. So to make a double crochet, you're going to yarn over. So it's just like you did with the chain. So just wrap the yarn around your hook, and you're going to insert your hook into that 3rd stitch. So right here, you're going to yarn over again, and you're going to pull your hook out. And that's going to leave 3 loops on your hook. So now to close the stitch, you're going to yarn over and pull through those first 2 loops. So there's 1 and then 2. You're going to be left with 2 loops. So you're going to yarn over and pull through the 2 remaining loops on your hook. And that's a double crochet. So we're going to make another one. So going into the next stitch, so right here, see, this is where we just stitched, you're going to yarn over and you're going to insert your hook into that next stitch. Yarn over and you're going to pull up a loop. You'll have 3 loops on your hook, and next you're just going to yarn over and you're going to pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2. We'll do one last one together, and then I'll let you complete the rest of the row. So you're going to yarn over, you're going to insert your hook into the stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, and then you're going to yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So continue making double crochets in each of the stitches of the row, or each of the stitches of your chain. So let me finish these up and I'll see you again in just a moment. You can find a PDF copy of this pattern on my website. I'll leave a link in the description box below. So I'm at the end of the row and I'm just working this last double crochet. And there we go. And here's what your row should look like. So it's just one row of double crochets. Now for row number 2 is where we're going to start setting up our alternating post stitch. You're always going to begin with a chain 2. So no matter what row you're in, you begin with a chain 2, and then you're going to turn your work around. And now we're going to work with the posts. So you have the stitch here at the top, which is what we would normally work with. So it's these up here. But today we are going to work with the post, which is this long stitch right here. And we're going to alternate between pulling one towards the front, and then we're going to push the next one to the back, and then one to the front, and one to the back, to create kind of this accordion look, if you will. So you're going to pull some of the stitches forward, and then you're going to pull the other ones towards the back. So it's basically what we're doing. It's just a lot easier to show you with the hook first. So to do this, we're going to work with front and back post double crochets. And this is all still in double crochet, all right? So we're going to insert our hook here behind that first post. So to begin our front post double crochet, you're going to have to yarn over, and you're going to insert your hook behind the post. So like this, and you're going to push the post forward. Then you're going to yarn over and pull up a loop. And as you can see, you've got 3 loops again, and you just finish the stitch like you would any other double crochet. So you're going to yarn over, you're going to pull through 2, and then you're going to yarn over and pull through 2. And that was a front post double crochet. The next stitch is going to be a back post double crochet. So we have to pull the stitch towards the back. So for this, we're going to insert our hook towards the front of the stitch so that we can push the post back like this. So this is what it's going to look like. So see, the post is right back here. Alright, so yarn over, and then you're going to insert your hook towards the front of your work. So loop it behind your project towards the front. You're going to push the post behind your hook. So push it backward. Oh, and I let go. Okay, there we go. So push the post back. So see, it's on our hook. We're going to yarn over and pull up a loop. And then you're just going to finish the stitch. So you're going to yarn over and pull through 2, and then yarn over, pull through 2. And that was a back post double crochet. So now the rest of the row, we're going to alternate between front and back post double crochets. So this next post, we're going to push it forward. The next one is going to be back post, front post, back post. All right, so moving on. This next stitch, so stitch number 3, is a front post double crochet. So yarn over, insert your hook into the stitch, so right behind the post, like this, yarn over and pull up a loop. And then yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Stitch number, 4, is going to be a back post. So we're going to yarn over, insert our hook in front of the post, push it backward, yarn over, and pull up a loop. And then we're going to yarn over, pull through 2, and yarn over, pull through 2. This next stitch is a front post. So we yarn over, insert our hook behind the post, and push it forward, and then yarn over, pull up a loop, and then we close our double crochet. And we'll do this last one together, and this one is a back post. So we insert our hook in front of the post, pushing it backward, and then we close our double crochet. So there it is. So front post, back post, front post, back post. You're going to continue the same pattern throughout the rest of the stitches of the row. So work on those, and I will see you again here in just a moment. So when you get to the end of the row, you're going to have 2 stitches. You'll have the post, and then you're going to have this chain. So we're going to have to do 2 additional stitches. So I'm just going to finish my post, and for me this was a back post, and it might be a little different for you. You might have a front post. But just finish that last post of the stitch, and then in this chain space, so between the chain space and that last post, you're going to double crochet 1. And that's just between the chain space and the last post. And that finishes up your row. For row number 3, you're going to begin with your chain 2, and in this row we're going to be inverting our stitches. So as you can see, this first stitch is a front post. We're going to have to turn it into a back post double crochet. So this time we're going to insert our hook towards the front, push the hook back, or the post, sorry, you're going to push the post back and turn that into a back post double crochet. The next one is going to become a front post double crochet, and then back post and front post. So you're going to be doing the opposite of what that stitch is. So if it is a front post double crochet, in this row you have to crochet it as a back post double crochet. Inverting the stitches is what gives the really nice interlocking look to this stitch. So row number 3, which is what we're going to start, is what you're going to be working on from here on out. So all we're going to be doing for the rest of our fabric is interlocking the stitches. So let's begin with this first post. Now as you can see, this is a front post double crochet. So in this row, we're going to crochet it as a back post double crochet. So I'm going to insert my hook in front of the post and push it towards the back, like so. And then I'm just going to yarn over, pull up a loop, and then finish out my double crochet. The next stitch is a back post double crochet. So in this row, I'm going to crochet it as a front post. So I'm going to pull the post towards the front. And then once I've got my 3 loops, we're just going to double crochet. So we got a back post, a front post. This next one, as you can see, is a front post double crochet, which means that in this row, I have to crochet it as a back post double crochet. And there we go. This next one is a back post double crochet, and we're going to crochet this as a front post double crochet. So what I'm doing is the opposite of what that last row was. Now if you can't tell what the stitches are, let me show you real quick. So the front post is just an uninterrupted post. See, you can see it pops up a little bit. That is the front post. The back post has this chain running right in front of the stitch. So right there. So if you see the back post, know that you have to pull it forward in this next row. And then that front post, you have to push it backward. And that's going to interlock your stitches. Alright, so I'm going to continue the front and back post alternating stitches throughout the rest of the row. You're going to do this in every other row after this. So it's the same stitch. So you're always going to begin with a chain 2 and then work your stitches in that same way. And once you get to the end of the row, you have to work that last post. So there it is. As you can see, for me, it was a back post double crochet. So in this row, I'm going to turn it into a front post. And don't forget that last double crochet at the end of the row. So between the final post and that chain that we did at the beginning, you have to crochet a double crochet. And that's going to be the final stitch of your row. So just insert your hook into that chain space and double crochet. And there you go. So that's row number 3. Now for row number 4, 6, and all the rest of them, remember to always begin with the chain 2, turn your work around, and it doesn't matter whether your first stitch is the same as mine. So it can be a front post or it can be a back post. Just remember to do the opposite. That way you don't have to worry about stitch counts. And that way you can really just focus on the measurement of your piece instead of worrying about the stitch count specifically. So just remember to do the opposite of what you did in the previous row. So now you're going to repeat row 3, working the alternating post stitch until you've completed a fabric that measures the body length measurement on the chart. That's going to be the size that you need for your sweater size, okay? Make sure you write down how many rows you crocheted before moving on to the shoulder so that we make 2 identical pieces. Once you finish your square, it's going to look a little bit like this. Once you have your square, just work directly into the shoulder panel. Now for this, your yarn would have been attached because you're still working. It would have been continuous work. I'm just going to use a different colored yarn so you can see what I'm doing. So let me just loop this here. We're going to chain. There we go. All right, so to begin with the shoulder strap, we're just continuing with the same stitch. You're going to begin with a chain 2, just like you have for every other row. Now for my size, I'm going to work 11 stitches, and that is because I need a measurement of about 2 inches. Again, refer to the measurement chart on the pattern. That way you can get the right size for your garment, but I'm going to work 11 stitches. So repeating the same stitch that we've been working before, I'm going to begin with a front post double crochet because my last stitch right here, as you can see, is a back post. So I'm going to crochet this as a front post, and then the next one is a back post, and then front post, and so forth until I have completed a total about 5 centimeters. So yeah, so the width of this is going to be 5 centimeters or about 2 inches. So it doesn't have to be 100% perfect. I think this one's just a little over the 2-inch mark. But here, let me finish these stitches really quickly. And then once you have your 11 stitches, we're going to finish the row here, chain 2, and then work the next row. So once you've completed a few stitches, like in my case, I did complete all 11, but once you complete a few stitches, it's a good idea to pull out your measuring tape and just measure the width and make sure that that is the width that you need. So here we go. I'm just a little over the 2-inch mark. So that's good for me. I'm going to write down how many stitches I crocheted because remember that you're going to make a second piece just like this. Once you've got that, you can begin with your chain 2. You're going to turn your work around and you're just going to begin a new row. So, and it's the same, just your alternating post stitch. Now, continue working a few rows until you hit the measurement that you need for your size. So just make sure you jot down how many rows you've crocheted on your shoulder piece. So again, that way you have 2 matching ones. And once you've completed your shoulder piece, you're going to finish that last double crochet of the row and you're going to end in a chain 1. So let me show you. Here we go. So after your last double crochet, chain 1, and that will make a small knot here at the bottom. And then you're going to cut a long tail end of yarn and pull your hook through as well as your yarn, and then just pull on your yarn to tighten that little knot. That way your work doesn't unravel while you're working on your second piece. Alright, so repeat all of the steps you've just completed so that you make 2 identical pieces. And then we're going to add the buttonhole to one of these panels. So choose one, and you're going to add the buttonhole in addition to all of the rows that you just crocheted for the height. So here, let's get started. In the buttonhole, I just worked it in single crochets. So for this, we're just going to begin with a chain 1, and you're going to turn your work around, and you're going to single crochet into each of the stitches of the row. So beginning on that very first stitch, you just single crochet all the way across. To single crochet, you insert your hook into the stitch, yarn over, and pull up a loop so that you have 2 loops on your hook. Then you just yarn over and pull through both of the loops, like so. So that's a single crochet. So we'll do one again. So going into that next stitch, we're going to insert our hook, we're going to yarn over, and we're going to pull up a loop. When you have 2 loops on your hook, you yarn over and pull through both of those loops. So that's a single crochet. You're going to single crochet into each of the stitches across the top of the shoulder strap. So that's just going to create a nice little base for our buttonhole. So let me finish these quickly. Here we go. All right, so you get to the last stitch of the row. So I'm going to single crochet here. And we're going to begin the next row with a chain 1. Turn your work around. So now for the button that I used, remember that it was about 1 inch across. I'm going to make 3 single crochets and then a chain of 4, skip 4, and then just finish the rest of the row. Now you can be a little more flexible depending on the size of your button, but I would begin with at least 3 single crochets. So do 3, maybe 4 if you're using a smaller button. So beginning on that first stitch of the row, I'm going to single crochet 1, and then 2, and then 3. And then I'm going to chain 4. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm going to skip 4 because that's how many stitches I chained. So we're going to skip 1, 2, 3, 4. And in the stitch right after that, I'm going to single crochet. So I'm going to single crochet into the remaining stitches. So here I've got 4 stitches. I'll just single crochet into each of those. So just remember to skip however many stitches you chained. And then that way you can make the buttonhole match whatever size button you choose to use. And there we go. Now before moving on, make sure that this hole is the right size for the button. So just grab your button and try to slip that through. It shouldn't be very difficult to slip it through, but it should also have just a little bit of tightness between the button and the buttonhole, just to keep the button from popping out. Alright, and then adjust it if you need to for whatever size button you're using. Okay, so we're going to begin the next row with a chain 1, and we're just going to single crochet all the way across. So I'll single crochet into my first 4 stitches. So here's 3 and 4. And then we have to single crochet 4 into this chain space. So that is because we did chain 4, skip 4, and now we're going to single crochet 4 into the chain space. So do the same no matter how many stitches you skipped. So if it was a chain 5 or it was just a chain 3, you're going to do the same number of stitches that you chained and skipped. So I'm going to finish my single crochet 4. There we go. All of them in that same chain space, as you can see right here. And that's going to give us that same stitch count for our next row. Alright, once you finish that, just single crochet into the remaining stitches of the row. So I've got 3 left. And there we go. So there's our row. We're just going to work one last row just to give it a nice little edge. So we begin with a chain 1, and this one's easy. You just single crochet all the way across. So each stitch gets 1 single crochet. And there you go. So that was the buttonhole. So if you have any questions on how to adjust it, if you're going to be using a different size button, you can always just leave a question down in the comments below, or you can always shoot me an email. So my email address is in the description box, so feel free to use that whenever you need to get a hold of me. Alright, so I'll finish this last row. I've got 1 stitch left. And then when I finish my work, I usually like to end in a chain 1, just so that we have that little knot. So here we go. Here's our work. It's nice and even. Okay, so to end this, I'm just going to chain 1. That's going to make that little knot at the bottom, right here. I'm going to cut a nice long tail end of yarn. So let me grab my scissors and I'll just show you. So we cut here. And you're going to pull your hook out along with your yarn. And then just pull on the yarn to tighten that little knot. And there you go. So here are both of our pieces. So we have the front piece and the back piece. And now we can move on to the sleeves. For those of you that are a little bit more advanced and you want to do some of the color striping, you can make them, remember, as wide or as narrow as you want. This is your piece, so make it however you want. But here is how I broke down the stripes for my little sweater. Remember that this pattern is worked from the bottom towards the shoulder. So begin with the beige stripes, so the 6 beige stripes, and then you're going to end up in the top teal part, which then leads on to the shoulder. Alright, so let's continue with the sleeve. Now, like I showed you earlier in the video, we are going to be making a trapezoid shaped sleeve so that it begins wider at the shoulder and then it narrows up into the wrist area. So it'll be a little bit more narrow at the wrist. So check the sleeve measurements for your sweater size. You're going to begin with that chain that is the width of the shoulder, and then you're just going to work the length. Now to get the decreases, you're going to work 3 rows of just regular alternating posts. And on the 4th row, you're going to decrease. And you're going to decrease at the end of the row and at the beginning of the row. So on both sides. The decrease is really, really easy. We're just going to skip a stitch. So it's going to start shaping your sleeve just like the one that you see here. You'll need to crochet a chain in the shoulder width that you need and a row of double crochets. And once you have your chain, you've begun your first row of double crochets, just like we did at the very beginning of the video. We're going to begin with our 2nd row, which is going to be the foundation of our alternating posts. And this is just a quick review since we've already done this before. So you're going to begin your row with a chain 2. You're going to turn your work around, and we're going to begin the foundation of our alternating posts. So I'm just going to begin, there we go, with a front post double crochet, and then back post double crochet, front post double crochet, and just continue working this way until I have completed the entire row. So once you get to the end of the row, don't forget to work that last double crochet between the post and the chain, and then you're going to chain 2, and we're going to begin with row number 3. Now for row number 3, we've already established the front post back post pattern. So now we're going to start inverting the stitches. There we go, I can remember the word. So you're going to start inverting them now. So the front posts then become back posts, the back posts then become front posts. Just the same stitch we've been working on. So you're going to work row number 3, and then remember that our decreases begin on row number 4. So let me finish these last couple of stitches real quick. And there we go. So we begin row number 4 with a chain 2. So there's 1, 2. And to do the decrease, all you're going to do is skip the first post. So here's that first post. I'm just going to skip it and begin on that 2nd post of the row. So this one is a front post, so I have to turn it into a back post. So there we go. Then we'll work the next stitch and the next stitch, and you just continue with the same pattern that we were working. So invert your stitches until you get to the last post of the stitch. When you're at that last post of the stitch, you're going to also do a decrease, so you're going to skip it and just work that double crochet. So skip the last post and work the double crochet that is between the post and the chain stitch. So that's going to be the final stitch of your row. So I'm going to skip this post and then work that double crochet, and that's the decrease. So here we go. And there you go. So that was it. Those are your decreases. They were super, super easy. And now you're just going to repeat everything you just did. So you're going to do another 3 rows of just regular alternating posts. Don't skip anything. Those aren't decreases, just 3 regular rows. And then on row number 4, you're going to decrease. So repeat this until you have the sleeve length that you need for your sweater size. So make sure you measure every few rows, and also jot down how many rows you worked. Make sure you jot down too how many decrease rows you did. It's very important that you work the decreases on the 4th row, not just every other row or every 3rd row, because it'll change the angle of your sleeve. So you need a wider angle, otherwise the wrist is going to be way too tight. So just a quick note there. Once you have finished the length of your sleeve, you can add the little trim. So the trim is optional, you don't have to add that. I just worked 5 rows of single crochet, and that gave me this nice little edge right here. So I'll show you how to do that. You don't have to, like I said, it's optional, but I'm also going to use a different color yarn here. So let me grab my yarn. Let's match up the 2 threads. And this is how I would work a color switch if I was doing a color switch, whether it's the single crochet or the double crochet for the alternating posts. So for this one, I just loop the yarn through. So leave a long tail end of yarn. You're also going to use this to sew your sleeve closed if you're doing the 2 colors. I'll tell you more about that here in a minute. If you don't want to switch colors, this is what it would look like if you're doing the sweater all in one color. So you can still tell the difference because it's a different stitch. All right, so switching the color, I'm just going to make a loop on my hook. So remember, leave a long tail end of yarn, pull that loop through your stitch, tighten everything up, and then I just begin with either my chain 1 or my chain 2, depending on what stitch I'm working on. Since this is my single crochet, I'm just going to begin with a chain 1. So there we go, there's my chain. Turn the work around, and then you just begin your stitching. So I'm going to stitch beginning on the very first stitch of the row. I'm going to do my row of single crochets, and then at the end of the row, you're going to chain 1, turn your work around, and then continue working into your next row. So let's begin here. On that first stitch of the row, we're just going to single crochet all the way across. When you get to the end of the row, and you've already made your last single crochet, you're going to begin the next row with a chain 1, turn your work around, and then just begin again. So begin on that very first single crochet of the row. You're going to insert your hook into the stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, and finish your single crochet. So just continue this. Like I said, I did 5 rows. You can make as many as you want. Just make sure you write down how many rows you did so that you do the same thing for your second sleeve. Once you finish that last row, we're going to cut a nice long tail end of yarn, and I'm going to use this tail end of yarn to sew this cuff section of the sleeve because it's a different color. If you're using the same color, I would still suggest you leave a long tail end of yarn. That way you can weave the yarn tail ends in and you won't risk unraveling your work. Alright, and since I have a different color here for this beige part of the sleeve, I have to cut a long tail end of yarn there. And something I forgot to mention is when you first begin your sleeve, also leave a long tail end of yarn. You're going to use this tail end to sew the sleeve onto the sweater. If you've already begun your sleeve, you don't have to undo it. Just leave a really, really long tail end on the other side. So once you finish your row, leave this one really, really long. You're going to use this to sew the sleeve closed and also to sew the sleeve onto the sweater. That's optional though. You can also cut a new piece of yarn if you want to sew the sweater, the sleeve onto the sweater. So those are just options so you don't have to weave in so many tail ends. Alright, so complete a second sleeve, and once you have both of your sleeves, we're going to go through and sew them all closed. So I'll show you how I'm going to sew this closed. And this is the same stitch I'm going to use to stitch everything on the sweater. So grab your yarn or tapestry needle, whatever it is you're using. We're going to thread this through. And then you're going to have to line up your sleeve a little differently than you normally would when you sew. So make sure you fold it in half. Then I'm going to start with a stitch here at the top. So there we go. That's going to hold the sleeve together. And then we're going to pop open the sleeve and we're going to line up the edges like this so that they're side by side. And then we're going to sew across the top of the stitches. So we're just going to lay the stitches across the top instead of when you line up your stitches like this and then just sew through. You have to line them up the other way so that your fabric is laying flat and you're stitching across the stitch. That way it makes a less visible seam. So it won't be entirely invisible, but it'll be a lot less visible than you would have otherwise. So laying your stitch like this, you're just going to sew across the top of the stitch. So there we go. And then you go through, and then you're going to stitch again across the other side. So you're going to stitch in one direction, just up, down, and then in the next stitch, you're going to go down, up. And try to grab as much of the stitch as you can on both sides of the fabric, just to keep your sleeve closed while the child is wearing the sweater. So see, we're just laying it across and then stitching through. Another thing to note is don't tighten your stitches too much, otherwise it'll start to scrunch up the fabric. So you'll end up with a scrunched up sleeve on one side or the other. And that's it. So this is the same stitch you're going to use when you sew all different parts of your sweater. So whether it's this top part right here with the little cuff, or if you're adding the sleeves onto your sweater, you're going to use this exact same stitch. Once you have sewn together both of your sleeves, we're going to add them to the vest part of the sweater. First, you're going to have to sew the shoulder part onto your sweater. So here, let me lay this the way that you would normally have to look at this. So you're going to lay your work like this, and then you're going to sew the shoulder strap, so right this part, onto the shoulder part of your other piece, so that it's going to come together like this. Leave the side with a buttonhole without stitching, unless you chose not to add a buttonhole. Then you can sew that part together as well. But sew the shoulder part first, and then you're going to sew the sleeves on. So here's my shoulder piece. I've already stitched it on. I've left the buttonhole part like this. We haven't stitched it on. Just a quick note for beginners. When you finish a piece, don't cut the yarn, especially at the very end of the knot, because it might unravel your work the first time you wash it. Instead, make the little knot at the end, and then you have to weave in the ends. If you don't know what that is, I have made a video tutorial that specifically shows you how to weave in yarn ends. This will help keep your work together, and you'll be able to wash it, depending on your yarn specifications, but you'll be able to more easily wash your piece without running the risk of it becoming unraveled. So I'll leave a link to that video in the description box below. So go through and weave in any remaining tail ends you've got. So I've got this little tail end right here, and then I switch colors, so I have all of my color switches to weave in. Go through, weave that in, and then we can sew on these sleeves. Alright, so once you've got everything woven in, we're ready to start sewing the sleeves on. So this is what our pattern looks like so far. I used a little stitch marker, or you can use a safety pin, to pin down the buttonhole part. So make sure you leave some fabric. Don't just pin it like this, because there's going to be nothing to sew your button onto. Instead, overlap it a little bit on the fabric so that you have enough space to sew a button onto it. And then just line everything up like this, and then we'll sew on the sleeves. So I'm going to begin with the side that has the buttonhole, just 'cause it's a little bit harder. But when you sew the sleeves on, make sure your seam is at the bottom. Then you're going to line up the sleeve. So line it up here with the shoulder. If you need to pin it down to help you keep it straight, go ahead and just pin it down. But we're going to sew along the whole side. So let me show you here on this completed one. So I sewed on along the buttonhole just to close up the shoulder part and fully attach the sleeve onto the sweater. And that way when you close the buttonhole, everything is attached. So the other sleeve is a little bit easier because you don't have to worry about a buttonhole. So you just sew it along the side here. So line it up, sew all the way across. And then at the end, you're going to sew the bottom part of the sweater closed. For sewing your sleeves on though, make sure that everything lines up so that the bottom side of the sweater lines up, both of the sleeves line up where you want them to be, and then you can sew. At the end, we'll do the neckline as well as that bottom part of the sweater, so the little bottom elastic part. So once you've completed sewing on the sleeve, you can use that same yarn to sew along the sides of the sweater. And then just sew that closed, and it's going to make it look like this. Once you've got everything sewn in and you've woven in all your ends, we can add some trim to the top and bottom part of the sweater. So for this, the bottom part is quite easy. It's just a single crochet all the way around. So just like how we did here on the sleeve, I'm going to crochet the same number of rounds. So I did 5 rows, I'm going to make 5 rounds. So single crochet all the way around. You don't have to stop at the end of the row or anything. Just keep working around until you have the same number of rows as the cuff on your sleeve. Now for the neck, this one's a little bit different, so I'm going to do this one with you. But I'm going to move this pin here so I can open up the buttonhole. We're going to work, again, a series of single crochets. This one is not worked in the round, but I'm going to begin here on the buttonhole, and I'm just going to work single crochets all the way around. So go here to the corner, all the way around, until we get to where the buttonhole meets the front part of the sweater. So right here. So just line that up, see where it ends, and then I'm going to add a stitch marker just to tell me where to stop crocheting. So you can crochet all the way across if you're more comfortable doing that, but I'm just going to place a little stitch marker, and that'll tell me where to stop my round, or I guess not my round, my row in this case. So I'm just going to begin here with my yarn. So let me grab my hook, grab my yarn. I'm going to begin on the first stitch of the buttonhole. So whatever stitch that you can comfortably insert your hook into, start there. Sometimes that first stitch is a little bit rough to try to work into. But again, leave a long tail end of yarn, loop that through your hook, and then pull through that first stitch. I'm going to chain one using all of the threads of my yarn, like this. And now we're ready to begin. Let me grab some more yarn here. and I'm just going to single crochet all the way across until we get to that first corner. So here's the first little corner. We're going to do a decrease in the corner just to make the end round. So single crochet all the way until you reach the corner, like how I am here, and then you're going to work a decrease. This is going to round the edges, and I'm going to do this in every single one of the rows. So here's how you would do a decrease. You're going to insert your hook into one stitch, so on one side of the corner, and then you're going to insert your hook into the next stitch. Skip this one right here in the center, just go to the one right after that. And this is just in this first row, right, where you skip that corner one. Once you have 3 loops on your hook, you're going to yarn over and pull through all 3 loops. And there's your decrease. This is going to start rounding out with every row you complete. Alright, so now for the rest of the stitching, we're going to continue working single crochets. In every corner, you're going to work a decrease. So single crochet until you get to the corner, and then decrease, just like I showed you. I'm going to continue working until I get to the stitch marker, which is going to mark the end of my row. So continue single crocheting, working decreases until you get to right about here, and then I'll meet you there. Alright, so I got to the end of my row, and then you're just going to chain 1, turn your work around, and just repeat. So single crochet all the way around. When you get to the corners, work a decrease. Don't skip a corner stitch for the decrease anymore. Just work the 2 stitches side by side as a decrease. And then repeat that in all of the little corner stitches. Go around as many times as you want. I think I only did 3 rounds for the neckline, whereas the bottom trim I did 5 rows. Work that as wide as you want, and then when you're done, go through, weave in your ends, and then just sew on the button. But that's it. I hope you've enjoyed this week's tutorial. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, hit the subscribe button. I post videos every week. If you have any questions or comments, you can always leave them down below, or you can email me. I'll leave my email address in the description box. Stop by the website to get the measurement chart for this project, as well as the written pattern. If you want to see any more of my work, you can also follow me on Instagram. You can find all of those links down in the description box below. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all again in the next tutorial.